the first UK government certified identity service provider. What does that mean? That means the Brits have actually gone in and looked at everything in our company and certified, guaranteed that we can give public services to people.
Okay.
Yeah, cool. We can stop that. How does age estimation work? So you've got, this isn't a scene from the Avengers where they melt away. This is to tell you what happens. So what happens with age estimation is basically the AI looks at your face, breaks it down into a number of anonymous pixels that are given numbers, looked at, and then an age comes out. Besides what you have on the screen, it's that we've trained our artificial intelligence to look at millions and millions of faces to recognize age. Now, these faces were anonymized, no identity, they were just given a number, which told them how old the person in that picture was. And with that millions and millions of pictures training, then it can recognize other people. Two things: the images were collected in a consensual way. We're not that kind of company. And does that work out? Yeah, cool. And we're also trying to ensure that people who are underrepresented categories of populations, such as trans people and people who have experienced homelessness or sexual violence, where their life experiences can affect the development of the structure of their faces, are part of those data sets. So you've got a little bit of how that works. So obviously what is the main benefit of age estimation is you don't need an identity document because not everyone has one, or not everyone has them with them when they want to buy something online or access content. Obviously it's highly scalable and images can be deleted as it says on the screen. Some of the people we work with, that's the NSPCC, I'll tell you a bit more about that. Lloyds Bank, who's recently invested £10 million into Yoti to develop solutions for how they onboard their customers. And it's not just online. So age solutions actually are used in the real world, if you will. In the UK, you can go to the post office, and collect a parcel with your digital identity. You can go to a cinema and say, I'm over 15, I can go see whatever film requires you to be that. Some of the big names we work with, I'll tell you a bit more about what we're doing with Meta and INCYBER in a second. Now, La Française des Jeux, which is the sort of formerly state-run national betting company in this country, we've put a trial together so that people can evidence their age when they go into a bureau de tabac, which is a sort of place that you do betting in this country, and can have their age evidenced. Again, without the need to provide an identity document, without the need to disclose personal information, just how old are they allowed to bet under French law. A few case studies. So what do we do with the NSPCC? So I've heard a lot of people today actually talk about, gosh, what if we had the solutions to help kids remove their images online? Well, we provide that to the NSPCC Childline Report Remove service in the UK. What you'll know is that if you're underage, you can't have your images online, obviously, but you need to prove you're underage. And for someone who looks 17 or 18, you could look very mature and actually have a very hard time proving that. So we give our solutions to the Internet Watch Foundations for them to help underage people remove their images from the internet. Another thing we're doing is with Meta. You'll know that Meta has something called Instagram, and on that, if you register as under 18 or over 18, you have different experiences. And so if someone happens to suspiciously change their date of birth from over 18 to under 18, which rarely happens, then that triggers a need to verify yourself. Again, you have an option, because we're not here to say to Meta, which is best, but Meta provide their own identity verification based on documents option, but we provide age estimation. What you can see on there is that 80% of people over and under 18 have preferred our solution. So 80% of people, because it just happens in 3 seconds and you can continue your journey online. A second early adopter is INCYBER. INCYBER is a French social network that's also gone global recently. So what they did initially is that they said, well, from now on, actually, all people who join us will have to age verify actually, because they provide age restricted sort of experiences online. So if you're 15 to 17, you're in a sort of certain segment, you've got access to stuff. If you're 17 to 18, etc. And if you're over 18, they make sure they don't mix with the underage people. And then INCYBER have actually gone and said, now we're going to move to 100% of our users. 100% of our users on our platform will be verified. So we can know exactly who should be where and who shouldn't be where. And actually also what they've told us that happened is that actually bots and bad users have actually gone away. Moving on, so obviously we continue to support regulators, governments, etc., and a lot across as many countries as we can. We're a small company, so it's not always easy, but we're obviously in the laboratory. For those of you staying tomorrow, we'll talk about that some more. This is something that came out of the Christchurch Call of Action that's co-led by the French and the New Zealand Prime Minister. Obviously, we do work with WEF, OECD, who are in the room. We're very thankful to them to include us, AFNOR as well, Agence Française de la Normalisation. And obviously, we work with regulators, Ofcom, FSM in Germany, KGM also in Germany, and the e-safety regulator. So whilst we're moving on to the sort of more chatty side, you can actually go on to Yoti, yotiworld.agescan, and it's not as polite as ChatGPT. I'll just tell you your age, but you can try it for yourself. Any questions? Sorry, I don't know who was first. Yeah, madam? Yeah.
No, but you asked to talk now.
Okay.
Okay.
Whoever wants to go first.
I was wondering if your application is different from those that are used by smartphones in some application where you can change or modify the face or the strain of the person. Is it the same product and
That's a very good question. So on our age estimation solution, one thing that is included as part of it is what we call a liveness and anti-spoofing test. So a liveness test is going to make sure that you're actually not someone putting a picture on their phone in front of the camera. So that's the sort of first thing. But the second thing is going to be detecting whether you're wearing a mask. So you'll know that some people now can produce some very, very, very sophisticated masks of other people.
even those can be detected?
That's right. Yes. Yeah, both of them. And that's part of the check. So in roughly 3 seconds, it takes you to do your age estimation. That those tests are done, to ensure you're not a bad actor.
And how you help governments? Sorry.
How do we help governments? So basically, we're not here to tell governments, what they should do, what they should vote for or not vote for, but we're there to help them when they want to do that. And a lot of governments, the e-safety commissioner in Australia, Julian Mangrant, yesterday, 31st of March, 4 days ago, published an age roadmap. We were there, we gave evidence, we explained our technology. It's just a lot of explaining, because I think this is something that people don't really know of and they don't understand how it works. And we just take those very long hours to run them through, share everything, how do we train the data sets? How do we use it? Full transparency. How are we run internally as well? That's.
It could be used to verify a legal evidence proof.
So in the United Kingdom, what we provide is right to work. So some of you will know we left the EU, and so we have a different regime for working, renting, and just living. So we provide 3 services: right to work, right to rent, as well as data DBS checks, which is when you want, for instance, to work with children, you need to do that. So yes, we currently in the UK, because the government has chosen to do that, not the others, provide legal sort of services where we verify someone's right to work in the country.
Thank you. We will.
If I may, I think it's better to take question at the end, so being conscious of time. So Mathieu has some time also to share with us.
Okay, thank you.
And then we come back to you for the questions for the end.
Thank you. Currently, national bills are being drafted in various European Union countries to force social networks to refuse the registration of their services to children. This platform will have to put in place a technical solution to verify the age of the users and indeed the parents' permission. How does UT age estimation work, and is it like facial recognition?
Yeah, it's a good point. That's the number one question. Are we actually recognizing faces? Do we know who you are when you're coming onto a cigarette shop or adult content site or social media platform? And the answer is no. As I've explained before, when it looks at your face, it deconstructs it into a number of pixels that are assigned numbers that create patterns. And based on the training that the AI will have had, it will have been taught to recognize patterns of aging, which we all share as human beings. Obviously, I've talked about categories that differ, but most people have that pattern. So at the point of age estimation, there's no information when you arrive and there's no information when you leave. The picture is deleted. There's no association to a name or an identity. And even more, in certain cases, in fact, most cases, you don't need to know whether you're Capricorn or Sagittarius. You just need to know if you're over a required age. And so actually you just leave with yes, over 18 or no, under 18, which is even more privacy friendly because you don't even have an age.
So the data provided is not biometrics, and because it does not aim to authenticate the person, but only to indicate to find an estimate of the age. However, it is still personal data related to an individual. So it is necessary to take into account its GDPR obligations and as a national laws. What are the information shared with the site, the shop, or the third party that requests such age estimation? Will they know how old really I am?
So in the context of Meta, in the context of Meta, for instance, what happens is the Meta wants to know if you're over 15 because that unlocks messaging functionalities. What we do is we determine whether that person is over that age or not, and we just return yes, no. Yes, they passed the test, you put the criteria, they answer to that. So it really is completely anonymized. I'll tell you one thing, if you're familiar with Oculus, which is a company that used to collect document information in Australia for health, well, surprise, surprise, 40% of Australians have had their passport information leaked online, which the company has had to pay for the replacement of. And so what we see is that actually platforms don't want to have that information. They do not. They just want to stay away as much as possible. And that sort of tiers de confiance, a trusted third party, they're pretty happy. We don't have that information. They're pretty happy for us to do it and really just return yes, no.
Okay, thank you. Your algorithms are using artificial intelligence. In such algorithms, we know that the training basis can produce some errors and some other effects when these software are used in production environments that are quite different to the learning part. This may be the case when the faces used in the training are very different from those present when using the tool, when using the age estimation. In this case, biases may appear and may decrease the quality of the estimation. How is your algorithms trained to reduce these effects? And what do you do to ensure that your algorithms and your data sets are as inclusive as possible?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. I think, so first of all, the thing we do as a company is every year we publish a white paper that is completely transparent. You can go to yoti.com white paper, and it has our margin of error for every age group and all the Fitzpatrick, skin tones. So you have the very, very detail of how good our tech is. Obviously, we try to reduce it year on year, which we're doing. Your question about how do we train that? I think it's a very important thing to say that it's hard to acquire images to train artificial intelligence, because we need to train it on the ages that are most sensitive, which is 13, 15, 16, 17. And so we need the parents' consent, etc. We work very hard to do that, to ensure that, we're not Clearview, we're collecting data with consent. We ensure that parents consent to what they're sending us. And it's hard to do that. Trans people, I mentioned before, people who transition obviously don't look, for instance, like their identity documents. They don't have the option of switching to identity verification. They can just use estimation most of the cases, but we need to ensure we've got those data sets. So if we try to work with these organizations and charities that can provide that. Final answer to your question is also you can ensure that you have a sort of threshold that's high enough for, if we have a margin of error of 1.6 year and you need people to be 18, then you're going to set the threshold to maybe 20. So if the artificial intelligence isn't convinced that the person is over 20, not 18, then that switches to a second step verification where you can actually do document-based verification or any other method, but you can have a two-step. So it's not pass or fail. You can have more sort of granular detail.
Okay, thank you. And the practical applications are quite new of age estimation without seeking the identity of the individual. Similar algorithms are currently being used in the film industry, for example, to change the age of the character in movies with the aim to digitally make them look older or younger. Do you see a global trend towards the use of age estimation rather than identity verification?
So the thing is, it depends for the service you're trying to access. Identity verification will be for when you're trying to access like a job, but age will be for when you need to buy cigarettes. So age is something that's very real in this world. We can go out now and buy beer and they'll have to check if we're over 18. So it happens anyway. It's just we don't seem to have the same sort of criteria for online. It's kind of fine for kids to go see beheading videos online, but it's not for them to buy a pack of cigarettes. So yes, there is a movement, but there's a sort of shyness, I feel, around imposing on age verification. I'm not making a comment about national governments or regulators' work, but what we see is currently when there is a law to impose on that online, sometimes we're a little bit disappointed at regulators, sorry if they're in the room, because the enforcement just isn't there. So there's a lot of platforms, for instance, who will have integrated our technology, but don't switch it on because they know they don't have to, or no one will come after them. So yes, there's a global trend. I think the most important thing you have to understand is not everyone has carte nationale d'identité, passport, or whatever. Not everyone does. In the UK, for instance, there's no national scheme. So if you're a French company, you want to operate in the UK, that's not an option for you really, because you'll discriminate against a huge chunk of the population. You want to have access to a potential pool of users as you would if you used age estimation. It's the most frictionless, and really you just need one thing, it's your face.
Okay, thank you. If you have any questions in English or en français as well.
Sorry, can you speak louder? Yeah. Oh yeah, cool.
How your product deal with the image created by artificial intelligence?
In what?
I mean, to bypass the edge.
So we're talking about age estimation. You're on Meta. You're getting age verified on Meta. When we look at the picture, there's those two steps that I talked about, which is the first is a liveness test. So liveness will be this thing where we just go, oh, move a bit, move your camera back a bit, and actually we detect if you're real, if you're a human, if you're living and breathing, because a picture won't move in the same way that you're faced with. It's those things, if you ever try to register for an online bank where they say, move the picture back a bit, that's not because it's not accurate, it's to trick you into showing them you're a real person. And then there's anti-spoofing, where we look at whether your face actually is whole, real, not altered in part. So again, we're working with Lloyds, which is the largest UK banks, because banks have also realized that the way they onboard their customers is not always good. And so therefore they're switching to our solutions. Yeah.
Do you store images, or do you store or save pictures or figures, whatever?
No. And we don't use them for training either, which is something you mentioned before. We do not use, so if you're going to un bureau de tabac to have your La Française des Jeux betting, we don't retain the image. We don't train the artificial intelligence on that basis.
Even for the work, you were talking about
Yeah.
the work, and not even for these cases.
No. So it's
So what if something wrong happened? How are you going to defend yourself, for example?
so when you're talking about the work, so this isn't an age thing. So your right to work in sorry, it's super niche because it's our new regime. Right to work isn't dependent on your age, it's dependent on your nationality or ownership of a visa or right to basically be in the country. So what we do is we check that you, ma'am, are the person who's on the documents. We do this matching, we look at the cryptographic elements of the document. And so we say, yes, the person presenting themselves to work at your office is the person on that document. There's a match. For age estimation where there is oh right, so you wanted to also know how do we defend ourselves in case someone underage accesses. Again, it's the threshold thing. So you set a higher threshold. So you say you took reasonable due diligence because you put the threshold at 20 years, where if there wasn't the confidence high enough that the person was over that age, then they went through a step 2 verification process which involved a document or any other method you decide.
One last question.
Bonjour. You said you work with La Française des Jeux. So right now, in some tobaccos, you have cameras and taking pictures and age recognition. Do you tell the people going in the tobacco booth? And is it legal?
Spoilers, when you go into a bureau de tabac, there's a camera already, because that's probably the security camera. So yes, le terminal en fait va avoir toutes les informations. Basically it's all going to be featured on there, and it's completely optional. You always have the non-computer route. We always keep that, and that also exists in UK supermarkets. The benefit of that, because we're talking about this, one thing that we noticed is that when people are asked to prove their age, is usually they're challenged by le buraliste, le marchand. And that's a huge point of friction. And actually, we see that in half the cases that results in physical attacks. So when people use a computer, they don't direct their violence towards the staff, and that's helped alleviate that. So yes, we tell them, obviously it's all explained. And in the UK, we have this thing called the Children's Code, which means that what studies have pointed out is the national average reading age is 9 years old. That means the UK population as a whole can read like a 9-year-old. And so we have under the law to break down those concepts and ideas to a language that could be understood by a 9-year-old. So yes, and obviously not recognition, so yeah.
How many tobaccos in France?
So that we just did it on a few because it was a proof of concept. It hasn't happened yet, but in the UK, all supermarket chains don't have it on don't go to London now because you won't find it, but eventually they will. We're pushing Morrison's, Tesco's, Asda's, all of them tried them, all of them like them, and we're pushing to change the law. Well, ask the regulators and the government, and we'll provide it when they agree. Yeah.
Okay, and if I may, as we start late, so the last question? Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I should be fine. I'd just be curious for sites where, say, there's reluctance from the user to provide facial verification. I'm thinking of adult entertainment sites, porn sites. A, do you have statistics on whether there is uptake of this? And B, what alternatives would you imagine could exist here?
I think that's a very good point. The thing is that with age estimation, you don't provide any information about yourself. The alternative being that you provide an identity document or a credit card. So most people prefer it. The one reason I can't provide you with like large scale statistics is because we don't yet have the case of the national government really strongly enforcing age verification for adult sites. And so we haven't got a place where I can tell you, yeah, that's how the industry behaves. That's what they switched on. That's what they've tried. You know, the thing I did with Meta, telling you 80% of people prefer it, can't do with adult industry. We have some early adopters. We have some really good actors who have actually not waited for law to come in and just switched it on, but we just can't provide that sort of industry wide. But you're right. I think it's a real question of, you know, for instance, if you're part of a category that enjoys some type of adult content, that could evidence that you have a sexual preference or another. So I completely understand that age estimation is to sort of least know personal information about yourself. But I understand your point.
As a user with Instagram, it's less, I mean, I have less reluctance because I'm sharing my pictures on Instagram regardless. so I don't, you know, it's not an added step in my head that Instagram's also checking my face for my age. But definitely I would imagine for adult entertainment sites, like, I believe the standard right now is just a pop-up, and I think France actually was talking about changing this and like implementing age verification. But thank you for sharing that.
No, you're right. I think some of the stuff that's been proposed, for instance, the credit card checks. So I think it's all of us as citizens is to understand, you know, where is our appetite? Am I okay sharing my whole carte nationale d'identité with my address, date of birth? Not really.
Okay. So we thank you very much.